I think I've always documented the world, also in still photography when I was a kid. But as soon as I did it in living images, I've just instantly felt home. It was very liberating. When it's really, really good, it's like you're melting into another world where you can forget about yourself and then see the world with other people's eyes. And that's kind of magical. And, I can get addicted doing that so much that I sometimes forget myself.
Jeanne's Heldinnen. Darf ich das? Kann ich das? Mag ich? Mach ich? You're listening to Jeanne's Heldinnen, the podcast for those with an appetite for a new world. Dear listeners, this is a special episode in English for the first time ever because my 39th heroine, the voice you just heard at the beginning, is the wonderful Marie Skovgaard, a Danish director that just released the documentary The Reformist, a female Imam. This film was presented at the Austrian Human Rights Film Festival, This Human World, and they invited us to have this interview in a new hotel in Vienna called Max Brown Hotel in front of about 17 people. I have to admit I was pretty nervous and excited. Marie is Danish. She is 36 years old. She worked a few years in theater, then for the Danish TV. She loves to be behind the camera and document people and analyze change in society. She was in Syria when the war started, documenting what happened in a small town she was living in. She traveled a lot, worked with many different people, and for the movie we are talking about, she spent 4 years with the visionary feminist Muslim community in Denmark, who opened the first female-led mosque in Europe. Today, she talks about filming as a therapy, about religion and faith, about camera being a shield, about societal change and the sometimes inevitable need of revolution, about doubt and perfectionism, and about connection and magic moments in life. I am really touched and feel quite blessed to have met this woman, and am sincerely amazed about how much I can relate to what she portrays. These moments of connections, which she describes in this podcast, are the ones I try to create during my interviews. I'm asking questions about life, beliefs, passion, despair, hope, and courage. And I'm trying to find out what it is that connects all of us and what it is that makes us heroines. I've created this podcast because I was in need of finding women role models I can look up to, because I felt tired of identifying with male heroes, because I needed these powerful and honest women to give me courage. This is the podcast Jeanne's Heldinnen, Jeanne's Heroines. I'm Jeanne Drach, an Austrian and French artist, podcaster, and businesswoman with a podcast label called Oh Wow. I am a passionate idealist, a sometimes narcissistic and always empathic feminist. And I am too a confused believer, as Marie said at the end of the interview. And my philosophy is inspired by my mom. Darf ich das? May I? Kann ich das? Can I? Mag ich? I want to. Mach ich? I will. If you like this podcast episode, be sure to share the love. And please subscribe and tell me what you think. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. The show notes will give you all the details. The interview is taking place in front of an audience and lasts for about 35 minutes. After that, there are questions coming from the audience I kept here. I didn't edit it away or something. So be sure to stay until the end. Thank you for being here. Have fun. So, hello everyone. We are here today in a Viennese hotel called Max Brown in the context of the film festival This Human World. And it's a double premiere because it's the first time that this podcast, Jeanne's Heldinnen, is held in English. And it's the first time that this takes place in front of an audience. So thank you for being here. And I'm really, really excited. I'm very excited and honored that my new heroine is the 36-year-old great film director from Denmark, Marie Skovgaard, who just released a documentary called The Reformist, a female Imam, and was also called before Imam. As most of you haven't seen the movie yet, here's a short introduction to it. The film portrays the female Imam Sherin Kankan and her community on their way to open the first women-led mosque in Europe. The film follows her from her early beginnings, talking about her vision of educating a new generation of female imams in Denmark, until her actual success of opening the Mariam Mosque, which is named after the only female prophet in Islam. She will be in international and national media, BBC, The Times, The Guardian. She will be performing Islamic interreligious marriages, also Islamic divorces, which will raise a lot of controversies and sometimes hate, not only in the far-right community in Denmark, but also in the Muslim community and also in her own community. Marie, you follow Sherin and her community in very intimate moments. And we see her, for example, with her family, with her parents and children. We see her having this conflict with her community, discussing difficult topics like same-sex marriages in Islam. And also we see her asking her, or doubting a little bit herself and asking herself, what is it that she's doing wrong? Do you fear that you could disclose sometimes too much personal information that could get her in trouble? Or how do you manage, like, on the one side, the urge of producing a great film, and on the other hand, having this responsibility towards your protagonists?
That's a good question, because there is no direct lines or borders or how to work with that. That's something you have to... That's a balance you have to work with all the time, and you specifically work with it when you're in editing. But of course, while producing the film, I had a lot of thoughts about that as well. I spent 4 years making this film, and as you said, it's a historical thing because it's the first women's mosque led by female imams in Europe. That means that I know that I'm documenting something historical, but for me, as a documentary filmmaker, it was a privilege to be able to document it in real time. That means that I don't know what will happen. Yeah. And I was so fortunate to come on board on the project, on their project, documenting it even before they had a space. Actually, from the beginning of her just formulating the first sentences of what this should be about. And that was really inspiring and at the same time, you know, extremely, you have to have faith in their project and in what you're doing, and you have to stay open for a long time, because even though I have ideas about where this will take them, I don't know, because it's real life, and so many things can happen, as they did. And my story changed several times from what I thought was gonna happen. So to answer your question, so while documenting it, I had lots of discussions with Sherin, because it is, of course, also about where is her border, how far can I take it, how personal can this be? And because she's balancing on something quite controversial and quite sensitive, being one of the first female imams in Europe and opening this mosque, of course, it's also something the mosque and her herself is balancing. How much are they telling the public? You know, I'm filming behind the scenes, but they also have some big discussions within the group of how much should we tell in public? Should we be quiet about what we're doing? And, you know, start marrying women with non-Muslim, which is something that becomes a big thing within the mosque, the interreligious marriages, which is breaking with tradition, because by tradition, Muslim women are not allowed to marry outside of the faith. Men are, women are not. So this is one of the topics within the mosque that they start performing. The other thing is women's rights to divorce without the acceptance of the man. Men have that right by tradition, women do not, and they make the same rights for women as men. So they have that discussion within the group, like how public can we be about it? And becomes a big discussion within the group. Because some of them are like, let's take baby steps. Let's not, this is, people will go crazy when they hear about it, so let's just, take small steps, be very precautious. And Jeanne, the protagonist, for her it was very important to be loud about what she was doing and be public about it. And that became a big disagreement within the group, but also reflects on me documenting what they're doing, because I'm, of course, also I have my own audience. But that's also the privilege of doing stories over time, because I don't have to decide while making it. And I thought I was going to spend 1 year from they opened the door to the mosque until stopping my documentation, because that would be a very nice frame for the work. 1 year of the Mariam Mosque. But that became almost 4 years. So a lot of those decisions were in editing. And a lot of those discussions were, of course, in collaboration with Jeanne, because there was also a lot of personal things going on in her own life while making this project with the mosque. For example, she got divorced herself, which is, of course, extremely personal and sensitive. And in the beginning, she was like, no, we can't tell this in the film. But because I was sticking around for quite some time, it became a possibility, because it was not such a new thing when I was in editing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I had actually the feeling that your work is very gentle and that you never pushed any boundaries, or you were like really very respectful. For example, there's this one scene where there's an interreligious marriage, and it's really like so fragile, the scene, and so beautiful. And I wanted to ask you, how do you do this? How do you keep like this distance and at the same time show something so true and so deep?
Thank you. I'm smiling because this has been one of the most difficult scenes to make, actually. Difficult because in the film, you don't see the couple who gets married. It's shot in a way where I keep them anonymous. But that was not the intention of while making the film. I really wanted to have a marriage in the film because it was kind of the center of the whole story, and it was visually so beautiful because it was integration between two cultures, two religions, of course, two people, but also a lot of drama often involved around these weddings, a negotiation with the family for them to be there and accept the marriage. Before the actual marriage, there was this conversation, but also during the marriage, sometimes a family member would say, I know I accepted it, but I can't do it anymore. And then they would have to talk more. And it's very dramatic, extremely dramatic. I could make a whole feature film of just, real life documentation of these marriages. So of course that whole drama was very interesting for me because it also just showed how difficult and how new this is. So I shot 12 marriages. They performed more than that, but I was allowed to film 12 marriages. And then I prioritized them like, oh, this is my favorite marriage. I really want to have this one in the film. And then, otherwise. And I went through all 12. And they said, no, we can't. No, we can't. One thing is to actually do it, but to tell the world that we do it. And we have to protect our families because now they finally agreed on it. And we really loved that you were there. And thank you for getting us a wedding, film. But, we can't publish it. And I'm like, okay. No. And then finally one said yes. And that was just very close to my final cut. And we edited it and it was all done. The film, I was really happy. And then they called me. We changed our mind again. Sorry, we can't do it. It's like, no. And we knew at that time when the premiere was going to be, we were the opening film of a festival, and it's a lot of pressure on the whole thing. So it ended up with me doing an anonymous version. And sorry, that was a long story, but now I'm really happy with it. These obstructions sometimes, or very often, I think, leads to something even better, even though you get gray hair and you don't sleep and you're so exhausted. Then something, that you didn't expect, you have to find solution anyway. And now I really love it because you can put yourself into it. It's not so specific to two people. Exactly. It becomes more of a symbol. And now I really like it. So there was a meaning and a point with that being so difficult. And you say that it's very respectful. Thank you. I try to. That's the being allowed into a project like this. You have to treat that with respect because it is just extremely sensitive. I keep saying that word, but I think it's difficult to understand how sensitive. It's a portrait of a group of Muslims in Denmark. I don't think I have to explain too much about the whole rhetoric and the way Muslims are being talked about in media. But for this group, it was extremely important for them how I portrayed them. And Jeanne, because she was a public figure before being an Imam, she also been running for parliament, etc. It was easy for her to say yes to the film. I think later on she was, regretting a little bit because I stuck around for a long time, and she began to be a little tired of that. Of course, who wouldn't? But she said yes, but the group around her were very cautious because they were used to, when they were in media, to be, misquoted or, portrayed in a certain way. So right from the beginning, I spent a lot of time with them, also not filming, just spending time with the group and within the mosque, and sometimes with camera, sometimes without camera, just to gain that trust. And also to get to know them, not just through the lens, but also just as a human being. So I think that intimacy that you talk about comes from time, because, creating that trust takes time. You can't do that overnight, and yeah.
And what role does objectivity play in your work and in your movie? So do you have to be objective? Can you be objective?
No.
Or is
I don't believe in that. I don't believe in being objective at all. No, I think it's very important to be honest about your perspective and who you are. And they were joking a lot because I kept saying there was a lot of new people keep coming into the mosque, and each time I have to, what's that camera? And hello, my name is Marie, and I want to do this film, and it's about, and people, you had to start all over almost each week with gaining trust with building trust with new people. And I kept saying, I'm not a journalist. Don't worry, I'm not a journalist. And I have big respect for journalists, but I don't see myself as journalist. And I tried to explain to them the difference was that I'm trying to understand what it means to create the space and what it means to be you, and more interested in the human condition more than this making news. And I was also very honest, saying I'm very positive to your project. I love it. I'm very inspired by you. I think you're very brave and courageous. And I don't have to hide that. I can still tell the story from that perspective. Not saying that it's a propaganda film or that I'm only showing all the good stuff, because for me it's also important to have the whole picture, even though it was, of course, still be simplified. And I have to be honest that it's told by me. It was told by a man. It would maybe be a different perspective. If it was told by a Muslim woman, I think it would definitely also be a different kind of film. There's so many choices in making film. Do you point the camera this way or this way? In editing, do you center it around this scene or this scene or this scene? about this character or this character. There's so many choices. So of course it's the perspective of me. So that's also why, you know, I have to be the one. If people are not satisfied with it, it's on me. I also have to take that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. In this film, Sherin Kankan, the female Imam, is presented as being very confident, but at the same time very sensitive and sweet, and not at all polemic. She always wants to find like a consensus, and she repeatedly says she doesn't want to burn bridges. But at the end of the movie, she says that it's impossible not to burn bridges if you want to create change. Is this one of the conclusions of the film, that in order to create change, you need a revolution?
Yeah.
And what do you think about it? What's your personal view on that?
Yeah, I think you have to. This film is about a specific group of Muslims making history. But for me, the film is overall about how to create change. And that I think we can all relate to. We've all been in groups where we have to agree on, you know, a thing, if it's within our union or, you know, at work or many different places. So it's about how to create change. Do you want to do it slowly, or do you want to see change already in the next generation to come? Sherin also talks about it in her film, because she has 4 children. She has 2 daughters and 2 sons, and she wants equal rights for them. They are born and brought up Muslim. And she's part of her reason why to do this project is because she wants her daughters to have the same rights as her sons. And you can't please everyone. If you want to create change, if you want to change something, not everybody will agree, and not everybody will like what you're doing. And that's a consequence that you have to take. And that's difficult, of course, because we all want to be liked. And I don't think there is many people who really like conflict. But I think that is a natural consequence of wanting to, you know, be in front and be one of the frontiers of a revolution or a reform, as they are. So yeah, it is one of the lessons that they have to go through.
Mm-hmm. Was there any point during this whole process of 4 years when you thought, oh my God, it's not gonna work out? Fuck this shit. And what did you do when it happened?
Yeah, of course that happens. And you doubt what you're doing, and am I telling it in the right way? And this is a never-ending project. Will it ever end? And as I said, I wanted to structure the film over a course of 1 year. So I filmed for 1 year before they actually got a space and opened the doors, and then I wanted to film that first year. And when I was in the end of that first year, I was like preparing myself for the beautiful ending, because it was quite beautiful. After the Friday prayers, more and more people would come, and you know, they became very sought out for these weddings. And so I was like, okay, now I have to tie the bow for the film. And that became a period where there was a break within the group, because some of them were tired of Sherin being public about what they were doing, and different other things. But it resulted in a lot from the board left the mosque. And that was exactly 1 year. And I was like, shit, this cannot be the end of the film. That's too sad. And at the same time, it's a very natural thing. You know, I also been documenting the uprising in Syria, and it was also, you know, a natural thing when within these groups that in the beginning, when everything was new and everybody were learning each other, because they didn't know each other beforehand, they get to know each other, and everything was so positive and so energized. And then because also it's a volunteer project, and a lot of them are having schools and work and life next to this, and it's a big thing. They spend so many hours. They were just exhausted. So it's such a natural thing that eventually Sorry, I was strictly told not to touch the microphone. So there was this break, and of course, I didn't want to leave it with that. I was curious to see what would happen, and would Jeanne carry on, and if so, how, and all this. So that became one more year of filming, and that was also when she was a little tired of being filmed, of course, and I was a little tired of filming, and I was like, shit, what to do? So we went on a very long holiday, a summer holiday, which was good for everyone. And then I continued for one more year.
Which messages do you want to transport through your movies? Because you're doing also a lot of television work, and you've worked in a lot of countries as well, in Senegal as well.
Yeah.
What are the key messages that you want to tell the people, or are there key messages?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm very processes of change interests me by instinct. I'm really interested in change. I'm really interested in women's rights, women's issues, women as such. Not that I'm only doing films about women, but it's what attracts me instantly. I was just at the museum today, this session. Do I pronounce it correct? Sensation. It was all the women of Klimt. I was so obsessed with that. So there's something drawing me towards that. And then I think I really like subjects where I think I know something about the subject from news or from, I like this whole breaking stereotype for me is interesting, or complexity, or trying to understand the world as a diverse, complex place attracts me. But I think a lot of different stories attracts me. But that's what I read about as books and music and stuff like that.
And did your work as a film director change your way of living life, your perceptions, your perspective?
Yeah.
Why are you hinter der Kamera, behind the camera?
Because I'm a very shy person. I always get a little frightened with situations like this. I'm mostly comfortable in behind the camera. I'm very comfortable with behind the camera. And it took me, I'm 36, and it took me quite some time to allow myself to make films, to get the confidence saying, yes, I'm a filmmaker. And that was before I was making films, and it was more of an idea that attracted me. And as soon as I started documenting, I think I've always documented the world, also in still photography when I was a kid. But as soon as I did it in living images, I've just instantly felt home. It was very liberating. When it's really, really good, it's like you're melting into another world where you can forget about yourself and then see the world with other people's eyes, and that's kind of magical. And I can get addicted doing that so much that I sometimes forget myself. Which is also nice, forgetting yourselves, because then you don't have to deal with your own life. You can just deal with other people's lives, and sometimes that's more fun. But sometimes it's also quite important to connect with myself. I'm trying to write that in my notebook. Remember to connect with yourself. No, but it's a privileged job because you get to travel the world and sit in places like this, having these kind of conversations. But also, yeah, I traveled a lot before also making films, and I was always a little bored. Like, okay, I'm here in the city, but what should I do or something? It's like a way into a specific community or part of the world where you are allowed because you have a camera, you are allowed to ask questions that can be difficult if I'm just Marie. But if I'm Marie with a camera, I become quite, I'm not so shy. I'm quite brave. I can, direct people that I would love to understand or talk to, and that becomes the purpose of going into a certain subject. Because even though I'm shy, I'm also extremely curious. So that allows me into to those different kinds of the world, or different kinds of corners and lives and all this. Yeah.
So the camera is like also like some sort of not weapon, but like your safe instrument or safe space or whatever.
Yeah. I was, during the war in Syria, I was documenting this city, which was occupied by the regime at this time, and it was quite brutal what was happening. It was war, and I've never experienced war. I come from a privileged part of the world where we haven't been anywhere near that. And it was a coincidence because I lived in Damascus when the revolution started. So it was a coincidence me getting into that. It was not me doing a choice of I want to experience war. But so I ended up there in this village with a camera. And it was, I found out that it was very easy for me to be there, even though it was difficult with everything that was happening. But being there was easy as long as I was filming. If I turned off the camera, I became frightened, and I had to deal with everything in another way than if I was all the time trying to search for the story or a picture or a person. So that's just an explanation of the shield. I think definitely it is a shield, and it keeps you focused. It keeps you sharp. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And talking about this is even something very special being, it's an extreme situation being in a place where there's actually war, but also in normal situation, everyone struggles in different levels. How do you deal with struggle, and how do you deal with fear? How do you deal with also this thinking of your work as being successful or not, and doubt and everything?
It's a good question. I doubt a lot, of course. I'm extremely. I always want to be good. I always want to be perfect. I want the things that I do to be perfect, and of course they are never perfect. And I've struggled with that my whole life, and I think one thing that has helped me is thinking that this is not the only project or the only story I'm telling. So next time I can do it a little bit more perfect, because of course I become better for each project. So that helps. I can see that in my work. Okay, looking at old work, I'm like, oh, that's so embarrassing. So. Yeah, the experience that I keep getting better is a nice reminder. And not to be so hard on yourself is also quite nice. But overall, I try not to think too much about it and try more have the focus inside the project, which also helped me just starting. I was very much in the 20s. I was like, I was working in theater. I thought I wanted to be a theater director, and I spent 5-6 years on that. And I remember having so many thoughts like, am I a theater director? Am I a filmmaker? Stuff like that. And I was like, I come from a family where you're not allowed to be so self-centered. So I was also shameful having these ideas. And I was just struggling with what am I? What should I do with my life? And that's a very typical thing, I think. Especially in your 20s, but it helped me as soon as I focused on the stories, and just telling them not so much about what am I, but more what is this story, and how do I want to tell it, and then try to focus on that, and that kind of helped all these other thoughts, and I think mostly most of the time I try just to drown myself in the story and then let myself disappear a little bit.
And what are the most happy moments in your life?
That's just when you know, making films is also a little bit like therapy, you know, because you need to connect with that person in front of the camera, and sometimes, you know, there's just this where you just become open to each other, and that's where it's, I don't know how to describe it, but when you just know that now I think there is a connection. Connection and a way into this human being or this story that is just right. Also because it's non-fiction, so sometimes it's just difficult to foresee what will happen, but it also means that there are so many nice surprises if you're open to them. Suddenly the light comes in an extremely magical way and you can do a very poetic picture. I film a lot myself and I really like to film myself. Or someone is saying something where you just feel it in your stomach and you just know how you can structure that in editing, and you can't wait to call your editor, and you know, you can get high from that experience. It's difficult to really explain it, but it's, or you suddenly get an access into something that you didn't think was possible, or I think I like it when it's really difficult to get access, actually, even though it's frustrating. But I like when I'm not invited in right away, where I have to earn the access. So when you earn the access and people are, you know, putting their shoulders down and opening up to you, that's kind of nice.
In an interview, you said that a real hero has flaws. And let me ask you now, what are your flaws as my heroine?
I'm sorry, I'm really giggling about me being a heroine. That's really funny.
It's always it's always a topic with all my heroines.
Yeah.
But it's what it's about, you know.
What are my flaws? It's extremely difficult for me to let go of my control. And this whole struggling after it becoming really good. I'm never satisfied. That can be somehow tough also. I can always do it better. I'm never like, damn, that was well done, Marie. You know, I never say that to myself. I'm still struggling believing in the things that I'm doing. Yeah. I believe in the stories, but I can always be better. I think that's kind of the thing, one of my flaws at least. And then I think I'm also, you know, there's a lot of very specific, you know, I'm always postponing things to the last minute and stuff like that, which is not a good thing, and especially when you're collaborating with other people. And I should be better at getting up earlier in the morning and writing on my new projects, but I really like to sleep, and lots of things.
But has it become better? Has your relationship to yourself become better?
Yes, because I really like what I'm doing, and that's really a nice feeling. That makes me you know, I feel at home with what I'm doing. Now I'm just struggling with how to make a living from this, but that's another issue. But yeah, no, it's. For me, it was difficult to be in my 20s, 30s are much better, so I'm looking forward to the 40s.
That's always a good conclusion. I think everything's getting better with time.
Yeah.
Self-confidence and everything.
Yeah.
And I've come to my last question, and this is the question I'm always asking my heroines. What do you think is a heroine to you? Or what is a heroine to you?
It's someone who practice what they preach, I think. Put in very simple way. I have a lot of heroines myself in music and literature and in photography and in art and etc. But I think I'm extremely attracted to those who are not just talking but actually doing most of all.
I can relate to that. Thank you very much. So
thank you.
Maybe you want to ask questions? Yes.
I do have a question. Earlier in the beginning you mentioned that it's the first female-led mosque in Europe. And I'm wondering whether there's, like, I guess then several female-led mosques all around the world. And while making the film, did you get in contact with them? Or did the group of this mosque, did they help each other? Or how are the connections?
A lot of things have happened in the last 5 years, because now the film has been out since March. And they're popping up everywhere. And that's really amazing to experience, because the film has been traveling. So we've been to some of the countries and cities where other mosques are starting. For example, when we had our North American premiere at Hot Dogs in Canada. By coincidence, the first mosque of Canada, women's mosque, opened 2 weeks before the film premiere. So I was able to invite the founder and the female imam and the whole community into the cinema. Also because Jeanne, often the protagonist of the film, she often travels with me, but she was not with me in Canada. So it's so nice to bring the whole community on stage, and they could talk about what they just saw from their perspective and from a local perspective. That was really, really nice. And there are a mosque starting now in France, and a year after this mosque opened, a mosque opened in Berlin, and they also perform same-sex marriages. And they are not the first women mosque in Europe as such, because some of the male mosques also have Women's Day, and they call it Women's Mosque, so it's also how you define it, but it's the first one opening like this exclusively for women by women, and women who actually take the title Imam. But there are historically also evidence of different kinds of women's mosques, also in Morocco and in South Africa and in China and so on, and in America. The first, there was a female imam called Amina Wadud. She's also in the film. She's a scholar actually from Berkeley University. And she's been writing the books that I think all these smaller communities that pops up, they read her book as you know, their guide. You know, it's the Quran, and then Amina Wadud's work just below, and she's an extremely smart woman, originally from South Africa, and yeah, she's a heroine. So she's been laying the theological argument as a base for all these, because a lot of the mosques are similar in some ways, but also very different in other ways. But they all have to have their theological evidence quite there to be able to make the fundament. So they use her books. But I must say also that the film has also connected with other faith communities outside of Islam. We had a screening in Poland, in Warszawa, where I don't think there was one Muslim in the room, but primarily Catholic women. And a lot of them were standing in line to Jeanne after the film, because the Q&A continued, I think, for 1 hour outside of the cinema. And there was women, you know, telling Jeanne and me about their difficulties obtaining divorce with their husbands. And they didn't really think it was something specific for Muslim women. It was, they could like one-to-one relate to it, which was very emotional for us to experience that. Yeah, so it connects with people in very different ways. I wish it could travel to the Middle East, but there's not so many festivals who really They think it's too much. We also tried Al Jazeera, like, it's a really good film, but no. We can't screen it. Yeah. But hopefully like smaller communities and stuff like that.
Any other questions?
I actually have questions. So I think that it's funny because I think you both do a similar thing. You try to open people up in front of either your camera or your microphone. So that's very funny to me, like very interesting to me. And so I was wondering for you, you use your camera as a shield somehow. And then you said you try to open people up, like you try to get people to talk to you and really get the guards down. But how much do you have to get your guards down in the process of doing that? Because then the camera can't really be a shield anymore, right? Do you know what I'm...
Yeah, I do think... But I think my camera is more the purpose of allowing that interaction with another person. And it's not a one-way thing to open another, connect with another people. You have to be open yourself, and you have to give from yourself as well. And I'm always I really try to be very personal in my own approach to allow that space of being personal. So I talk about myself and my own life and my own fears, and it can be very intimate things as well, with my boyfriend or whatever the kind of conversation I'm after. Or right now I'm doing a portrait of an art collector family in Denmark, which is quite known, and they've never allowed any filmmaker to do anything before, so I'm allowed into this space, and it's a mom and a dad and 3 sons and their wives, and they all work within the art industry. And it also becomes a big theme in that series about the relationship between fathers and sons. So I talk a lot about my own father in working on this series, just also for them to understand that what they experiences may be more universal than just within their family. So yeah. And working on this specific film, I had to have a lot of thoughts myself into my own beliefs and my own faith, which I don't think I think too much about in my everyday life. So that's also been a privilege, because you start thinking about certain aspects of your own life while making the stories, which only makes you become not just better at connecting with people, but also better at telling the stories. Yeah, I save a lot in therapy doing that.
I wanted to ask that question. What's your personal relationship towards religion, and in general towards Islam?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a believer, but I'm a confused believer. I call myself agnostic. I don't conform to one religion at the same time. I'm brought up Protestantic. I do go to church, at least in Christmas. I really love churches. I love religious buildings. I always visit them when I travel. And within the last 3 years, I learned meditation, and that has become a spiritual thing for me. But I don't confirm as it is right now. I don't conform to one religion, but I see myself as agnostic. And then in terms of Islam, I have a lot of Muslim friends. So for me, I haven't been that, I've known a little about Islam, but not a lot. So through this project, I've been reading a lot of books and collaborated with an Islamic scholar, also not to be stupid about what I'm doing. And I'm always saying, in Q&As, I'm not an Islam expert. I can't speak about Islam as an expert, only from what I've experienced within this group of people. But it's a beautiful religion. I really miss these Friday prayers for me, because they are, the mosque is for both men and women, but it's exclusively for women on Friday, so it's a female room on Fridays. And it's a really powerful room that I really enjoyed. I was always there on Fridays because while making the film, but now I miss coming there because, it's not just talk about faith, it's talk about life and all kinds of subjects there on these Fridays that I really enjoyed. I met so many very, very, very nice women at these Friday prayers. And I can't really compare that to any other religion that I experienced, because it's a religious room, but it's also a very female room. So that was a unique experience for me. And they have these kind of session called dhikr, which is a kind of Islamic meditation form, where I also sat in. It was often in darkness, and then they say these these quotes from the Quran, and they repeat it, and it becomes very how to say it. This repetition becomes
like a trance.
Yeah, exactly.
But they actually come from Sufi, right?
Yes.
So that's
it's Sufi-oriented mosque.
Yeah. So that has these elements of
yeah. I hope I answered your question. But at the same, I've also been conflicted, because through this project, there are so many strong-minded people in terms of religion, and not just Islam. That's any religion, that also oppress the individual. Where I'm also, I had this experience of I've been following this young couple. He was a non-Muslim, and she was Muslim, and they've been in love for 2 years, and they were living in hiding from her family because she was not allowed to marry outside of the faith. And they're so there was such a beautiful and energetic couple, and I filmed these sessions with the Imam. It's not in the film, and because they were trying to find a way how to live together without being rejected from the family. And she really wanted him to convert into Islam, because then it would be much easier and the family might accept it. And he kept saying, I don't want to, I accept your faith, you have to accept my faith, and it was all these kind of struggles. And then I think I didn't see them for a while, and then suddenly he came to the mosque by himself, and he almost opened the door I'm so tired of religion, he just said. And I was like, yeah, I totally understand why you say that, because for him that was the obstruction of being allowed with the woman that he really love. And that session with the Imam, actually at the end of that session, after 2 hours, he converted to Islam.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because, okay, I want to try it out, but don't tell her, because I really want to experience it for myself, what it's like to be Muslim without people judging it. It was very, very, very beautiful. Yeah. It's a complex thing, faith. Yeah, because it's so connected to tradition and the culture, and it can be so difficult to separate, I think. For me, at least, religion is very much about the rituals that I've had for if I was brought up Muslim, it would be the Muslim traditions that would connect with me, because that was what I've been doing my whole life. I assume. Yeah, I could go on.
Any other questions? We can still talk, but I'm just going to thank you. Thank you very much for coming. And
thank you. Thank you for being here.
This was the 39th episode of Jeanne's Heldinnen with Marie Skovgaard. You'll find all the information on Marie and the movie The Reformist in the show notes. Be sure to watch this fantastic documentary if you have the opportunity. Otherwise, please share the love. There will be other episodes in English, so stay tuned. If you have German-speaking friends, tell them about this podcast. Thank you mucho. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in change. I'll see you around. Let's stay curious and confused and find out more about this complex, absurd, strange world and strange human species. Guten Morgen, gute Nacht. Your Jeanne Drach.
Jeanne's Heldinnen. Darf ich das? Kann ich das? Mag ich? Mach ich?
Dieser Podcast wurde präsentiert von
Oh, wow.